Beside the magnificent mausoleum of Emperor Qianlong lies a much quieter cemetery. It was not built for emperors. It was built for the women of his inner court, Imperial consorts, noble consorts, and Imperial noble consorts. At first glance, Yuling Consorts Cemetery looks like a perfect landscape of hierarchy. Every bridge, gate, hall, furnace, and burial mound speaks the language of rank. But at the northern end of this cemetery, one tomb hides a disturbing contradiction. Under one large burial mound lie two women. One was Imperial noble consort Chunhui, a favored consort of Emperor Qianlong, honored with an unusually grand tomb. The other was Empress Nara, once the mistress of the Imperial Harem, but later disgraced and buried almost like a concubine. How could an empress end up here? And why was she placed inside another woman's underground palace? Yuling Consorts Cemetery was first built in 1747, during the reign of Emperor Qianlong. Later, because Imperial noble consort Chunhui was to be buried here, the cemetery was expanded and upgraded. A square fortress, a cell tower, side house, and new gates were added. When the project was completed in 1762. So this cemetery is not only a burial ground, it is a stone map of the Qing Imperial Harem. A total of 66 women from Qianlong's inner court were buried here. Their ranks were different, and their tombs were different. The higher their status in life, the more prominent their place in death. From south to north, the cemetery begins with bridges. Behind them once stood side rooms used for ritual preparations, including food offerings for deceased imperial family members. Today, only the foundations of some buildings remain, while the guardhouses of the banner troops still stand. The main entrance is Long Gate, the gate of eminent favor. Unlike an emperor's mausoleum, most of the major buildings here are covered with green glazed tiles. In Qing Imperial architecture, yellow belonged to the emperor. Green was used for lower-ranking royal or imperial burials, including the tombs of princes, princesses, and imperial consorts. Passing through Long Gate, we enter the sacrificial area of the cemetery. The western side hall was used by Tibetan Buddhist lamas to chant prayers and recite scriptures for the deceased consorts. The eastern side hall could temporarily house spirit tablets when the main hall was under repair. Offerings were also prepared here before being burned in the silk burning furnace. Even the furnace follows the hierarchy. The silk burning furnace here is covered with green glazed tiles, while an emperor's furnace would use yellow. At the center stands the Long Hall, the Hall of Eminent Favor. During the Qing Dynasty, rituals were held here at important times of the year, including Qingming, the 15th day of the first month of autumn, the winter solstice, and the end of the year. Inside the hall were 3 stone funeral pedestals for the spirit tablets of the women buried in this cemetery. But there was one exception. Empress Nara's coffin was buried here, but her spirit tablet was not enshrined in the hall. That means that in the ritual system of the Qing court, she was physically present in this cemetery, but spiritually absent from its ceremonies. To understand why, we need to walk further north to the largest tomb in the cemetery. This is the burial complex of Imperial noble consort Chunhui. Above ground, it has a square fortress, a soul tower, and a large burial mound. Beneath them lies an underground palace. For an imperial consort, this was an extraordinary honor. Chunhui was not an empress, yet her tomb was built on a scale far above ordinary consorts. In layout and status, this complex even resembles the Jingling Imperial Noble Consorts Mausoleum, where two senior consorts of the Kangxi Emperor, Qianlong's adoptive grandmothers, who had helped raise him when he was young, were buried. In other words, the architecture tells us clearly Chunhui was the true owner of this underground palace. But inside the underground palace, another woman was placed. That woman was Empress Nara. Empress Nara was Qianlong's second official empress. After his first empress, Empress Xiaoxian, died. Nara eventually became the new empress of the Qing Empire. She gave birth to the 12th imperial prince, Yongqi, the 5th imperial princess, and the 13th imperial prince, Yongqi. For many years, she stood at the highest rank of the imperial harem. But in 1765, during Qianlong's sudden tour to Hangzhou, something suddenly changed. The exact cause of the conflict is still debated. Later accounts connected it with jealousy, succession politics, and Qianlong's growing favor toward another woman, Consort Ling. This is important because Empress Nara had given birth to the 12th imperial prince, Yongqi. A son born to the reigning empress, Yongqi, could be seen as having a special position within the imperial family. Meanwhile, Consort Ling's rising favor, together with the fact that she had already given birth to imperial sons, was quietly threatening the future prospects of Yongqi, the empress' only surviving legitimate son. So for Empress Nara, this was not only a matter of personal favor, it may also have touched the future of her own son. The most serious act in this crisis was hair cutting. In the Qing court, hair cutting was an extremely sensitive taboo. For an empress to cut her hair while the emperor and the empress dowager was still alive could be interpreted as a sign of mourning, almost as if she was cursing them with death. Qianlong was furious. Nara was sent to Beijing ahead of the imperial party. After returning to the Forbidden City, she was placed under confinement. Her seals and investiture documents, the symbols of her rank and honor, were taken back and destroyed. Her attendants were reduced to only 2 female servants. She was not publicly abolished through a full formal ceremony, but in reality, she had become an empress in name only. After more than 1 year of installation, Empress Nara died in 1766. Qianlong did not give her the funeral of an empress. Her ranks were downgraded to the level of an imperial noble consort. She was not buried in the emperor's own mausoleum, where a Qing empress normally belonged. Instead, she was placed here, inside the tomb complex of Imperial noble consort Chunhui. That is why this underground palace is so powerful. It is not only a tomb, it is a frozen political judgment. The passage inside the square fortress leads toward the underground palace. Under the square fortress, there are also two side passages leading down to the underground palace. These side passages were opened in modern times for conservation and visitor access. Before 2025, visitors could walk down into this underground palace. The underground palace is mainly composed of four paths: the tomb passage, the front antechamber, the stone dial, and the innermost coffin chamber, sometimes called the golden chamber. Inside the golden chamber, the central coffin belongs to Imperial noble consort Chunhui. She was buried here in 1762. Nearby is the coffin of Empress Nara, buried here in 1766. One woman was honored beyond her rank, the other was reduced below her rank, and in death they were forced to share the same underground space. This is the central tragedy of Yuling Consorts Cemetery, but the story of this underground palace did not end in the 18th century. In 2025, the underground palace was closed. The most dramatic explanation circulated among guides, visitors, and even some heritage workers was this. People said that near the golden chamber they could sometimes hear the voices of two women talking. When visitors moved closer, the voices stopped. But when they walked back toward the tomb passage and began to leave the underground palace, the voices seemed to appear again. Because of these strange reports, the management authority of the Eastern Qing tombs decided to close the underground palace. Whether one believes this story or not, it became inseparable from this modern memory of this tomb. So the question becomes even more haunting. If Imperial noble consort Chunhui and Empress Nara were still speaking in the 21st century, what were they talking about? After the death of his mother, Empress Nara, in 1766, the 12th Imperial Prince, Yongqi, gradually lost whatever possibility he might once have had of inheriting the throne. Instead of moving toward the center of imperial power, he was assigned to scholar work on Manchu and Mongolian culture. In 1776, Yongqi died at the age of 25. Without any formal imperial title, his funeral was conducted not with the honors of a prince, but according to the general regulations for imperial clansmen. With his death, the lasting surviving child of Empress Nara was gone. Yet beyond the gaze of death, perhaps the fallen empress and the children she had lost were finally gathered together in the heavenly realm. Leaving Chunhui's large burial mound, we can see the smaller mounds of other consorts behind and around it. Except for Chunhui and Empress Nara, 34 other consorts were also buried in this cemetery. All of them had their own burial mounds and small underground chambers. These mounds do not need long explanations. Their scale already tells the story. Some are larger, some are much smaller. The last rows are especially modest. For a foreign viewer, this is the simplest way to understand the Qing Harem system. Rank did not disappear after death. It continued underground in stone, brick, ritual, and silence. Thank you for watching. For more stories about ancient Chinese history, imperial tombs, and the forgotten lives behind the palace walls, welcome to subscribe.